Hi, Mattan. Thank you so
Hey,
much for
Netra.
joining us.
Yeah, happy to.
So, we are starting this new series where we spotlight a Sandboxer's exciting new initiative, project, book, and I want to ask you a few questions about your new initiative.
I love it. Yeah, let's do
So, tell me the name of your new book. I understand you
it.
have one that just came out.
Yeah, it's called Python for MBAs. Actually, I have a copy here,
Wow, it
which
looks
is
so
kind of
nice.
crazy. I know they sent me a box of 25, and I'm like, what do I do with 25 of these?
When I had heard you wrote a textbook, I was like, I was wondering what it would look like, but that looks beautiful. You should keep it up there. I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a textbook, which is nice. It's not so
Can you
thick.
pull it up a little bit? So you wrote it with Daniel Guerra.
Oh yeah, his name is
Cool.
Daniel Guetta. He's a fellow professor with me at Columbia.
Wonderful. So tell us what
Yeah.
the book's about. Python for MBAs.
It is more or less. So I teach this class at Columbia Business School called Intro to Programming Using Python, and it's a total beginner's guide to learn how to code using Python, which is like for anyone who's unfamiliar, it's like the number one most popular programming language and growing crazy fast because of its use in like data analysis and stuff like machine learning and AI. And a lot of the students in the business school, people who are like getting their MBAs, who are interested in not being programmers, but working as like analysts or working as product managers or going into marketing, are starting to realize that like the companies they're joining, like Facebook or Google or Microsoft or Amazon or wherever, like really value being able to do some coding. It's sort of like being really good at Excel, right? That used to be and still is obviously like a valuable skill, but for people who know Python, it like takes it to the next level. So I teach this class. I started teaching it 4 years ago. They brought me in to create the curriculum, and it's become incredibly popular. Like it has 250 students per semester out of like a 600 person like class that goes through every year. And so this book is more or less like the written version of that class.
Well, I would love to be your student, Matan. You like, I think when you joined Sandbox, you were working on 1 month, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
can you just share a little bit about how your experience teaching has like translated now to Columbia and now to this book? Because when you say Columbia Business School professor, I can say this because I also teach at a business school. You get this really academic perspective, but you actually came in from the startup world. You were pulled in
Yeah.
by Columbia to teach this. So can you just say a few words on that?
Yeah, totally. So my background is not in any of the stuff from like, a traditional academic perspective. I didn't study computer science. I studied philosophy and finance. And I, got my first job working at a startup. And it was there where I kind of realized that learning how to code might be a valuable skill. I also wanted to start my own business. And so when I set out to try to start that, I also said, okay, I'm going to learn how to code and I'm going to try to build like a prototype of, what I was thinking of. And I didn't know anything about it at the time, so I was a little bit naive. But that journey then actually led me to realize that there's not a lot of great resources out there for learning how to code and just even the more technical concepts for people who don't have technical backgrounds, like who don't have computer science degrees. So that led me to start 1 month, which was my first startup. And at 1 month, we we basically had these online classes that were, the structure was 30 days to learn a new skill. We started with coding, so like Python, JavaScript, HTML, front end, back end, started stacking these together, and then also expanded into other topics like, uh, you know, like marketing and even how to start your own company in 30 days was, it's these areas that are really hard to learn about if you don't know anything, but you can make really quick progress if you kind of are given the right path to go on your own. So it was from that Columbia actually reached out. I had a friend who was the assistant dean at Columbia, and she had heard about this initiative of them wanting to get more technical classes internally. So she reached out, and I put together a proposal. And because of my background at 1 month and teaching those classes, they kind of knew that I would be able to come in from a different perspective. They had tried to do like, business school students take classes at the engineering school, but it never really worked because that approach, just didn't resonate with business school students. So that's what brought me into Columbia, and it was obviously a switch from going from teaching online to teaching in person, although I'd done a few in-person things before that. But even after I left 1 month after, close to 5 years, I kept teaching at Columbia, and I've been doing it now for almost 5 years, actually.
Well, how
Yeah,
did it
since
feel to be
2016.
like, because I imagine you must have been younger than at least like half the student body.
Yeah, that was weird. But that wasn't new. I started teaching randomly when I was like 22, when I was still working on this other startup and being at General Assembly and doing these classes on the side just to actually like, make a little money to pay for rent while I was working on other startups. So, you're in a class with people who are, in their 30s, 40s. I was like young, and I just got used to like not I didn't come in trying to be the authority on this thing because I think people would have seen right through that. But I came in sort of as like a peer and as like a fellow, like, hey, I know why you're here. I was there like a month ago or, a year ago. And here are the resources I found. Here's what I learned. Here are the mistakes I made that I can help you avoid, almost like a Sherpa rather than like someone from
Mm.
above telling them what to do. And I remember I even like that first class in person, not at Columbia, but at General Assembly. I was so nervous that I was like bringing everyone water, and I had like, pack of gum that I like passed around because a friend of mine who was also a teacher was like, gave me the tip of doing that. And then kind of like you ingratiate yourself with people. And so the same at Columbia, like I was, when I started, I was like 27 and the average age there is like 29. And obviously it's flipped, but I think it's strange. It's awkward at first, and then there's this sort of tipping point where people get it and they get that I have something valuable to say, and they find it interesting, and it's like not the same kind of pretense as with other professors, and then they kind of lean forward. There's a moment where they lean forward and start asking questions, which I love.
That's lovely. I mean, I just wanted to underline that, because you do so many things, and I think that your diversity in all of the projects that you do, I think helps make your teaching really accessible, and I'm sure that got translated into your book. So let's
Yeah,
switch
I
gears a
appreciate
little
that.
bit.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit. How was it actually writing this book and launching it during the pandemic?
It was interesting. So I'd always wanted to write a book, but I'd had a few failed starts and stops. In almost 10 years ago, thought about writing a book on growth hacking, and I interviewed a bunch of people and made it like 150 pages in, and then I just sort of totally lost steam and got derailed by other stuff, and on and off. And then it was about 3 years ago where I was teaching this class already at Columbia. I had this Google Doc with all my lesson notes and lesson plans that I review, and it improved and every semester like extended stuff, and it had already become like 150-page document, and it was more or less like the bare bones skeletal structure. And I looked at it, and one day I just had that light bulb moment. I was like, this could be a book. I mean, it's a popular class. All I'd have to do is kind of like flesh it out a little bit. And so the prospect of like accomplishing this thing I've always wanted to accomplish for whatever reason, writing a book, like arguably these days, people don't even read books anymore, right? They're more likely to watch videos and stuff like that. So, but there's still something to, setting out to do this like big project, and it is hard. But so I sort of quickly put together a pitch. Columbia University has a publishing arm, so I was like, all right, this seems like an obvious candidate. So I pitched them on the idea. They quickly fast tracked it, and it was like approved within like 3 weeks, which was kind of a surreal feeling for me. And then we set out, and the process of writing it was really just like the process of like breaking down this monstrous thing into like tiny little chunks. So like, imagine it's like, okay, you want to like, you get healthy and get in shape, or like run a marathon. And it's like, okay, you run it in 8 months. And so you got to start training. And so this, and this. And so I would just more or less 2 or 3 days a week would, go to the local coffee shop, this place in Williamsburg called Devotion that I love. and spend like 9 to noon just writing there. And I did that for several months. It went in sort of spurts. And so I think I wrote the first third really quickly in like a month. I was very excited. I was able to track my progress. I was using this app called Scrivener, which is, useful for writing books. And so you can sort of outline it and keep track of how often you write. And every day I just would try to hit a target, like, 700 words, or like, on a good day, like 1,000 words. It was easier for me because it's not like a fiction book that I'm kind of making up on the fly and have to write it. Like, I've taught this class so many times before. I'd probably taught it 8 times by the point I started writing. So all I was doing was just sitting, closing my eyes and imagining what would I say at this point in class, and sort of flowed out a lot more easily that way. And then interestingly, there was a point, so I wrote the entire book, and then my co-author reached out to me and said, hey, I heard you were working on this book. I have an idea for a similar book. Why don't we collaborate? And I thought, okay, I've already written this whole book. I already have this whole agreement in place. Does it make sense? And I spent some time going back and forth, and then ended up deciding actually it does make sense to work with him on this book, because he brings in a really like interesting perspective that's sort of more data science-y, and he's got the PhD and he worked at Palantir for like a bunch of years, and he brought in like a bunch of really good case studies. And so even after writing the whole thing, we ended up scrapping the second half and then kind of redoing it. So it took like 2.5 years or so from getting the actual like publishing agreement to having the final copy here.
Wow, let's see it again.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing.
Thanks.
That's amazing. Yeah, I guess you're one of the few people tend to like write the textbook, teach the class in person, and then they move to online, right? Whereas you were like already doing it online already, and then now you're writing this book. Can you share maybe one of your favorite sections of the book, or something that you think is really unique? Maybe a tip or a trick, I don't know, something that you want to highlight about the book.
I mean, there's a few moments in the class that I think people really liked, but it's really interesting on the data analysis side, because when you like one of the hard problems with learning something new, I found, is that people don't like learning new things because they don't like feeling bad at stuff. And also there's a point where you actually become less productive and less effective as you're learning the new thing compared to how you used to be able to do it. And then all of a sudden, sort of you hit that tipping point, and now you can actually do it better than how you used to be able to do it. But it's hard for people to envision. So there's this point when you're doing data analysis and you're like, okay, they're used to using Excel, obviously, most of these people, and doing some pretty hardcore analysis. But once you see how you can actually use Python to like open up an Excel file that's way bigger, or Excel or CSV file that's way bigger than Excel would even let you open, and then do like it so super quickly in like one line, do like a heat map of like the correlation of like all of the columns, or even like plot. There's one, there's something called a pair plot that I sort of like keep in my back pocket for one of the classes, and we cover here. And it just like automatically shows all the scatter plots and histograms of every single column of all the data compared to every other column. And people look at it and they're just like, oh my God, this is insane. And this would take, hours to do in regular Excel. And all of a sudden, like, you can do it in one line of code. And like, it's stuff like that where people really get the value of it. And then when they can start connecting it to like this project that they already have been working on or are about to work on, and realize they can save a lot of time, that's really cool. Like that connection, not just to the theory and the material itself, but to like connecting it to their lives, I think is what makes it really interesting. I had a student email me, when I was actually announcing this book, telling me he took this class. He was never technical before. He then started taking every coding class he could find at the business school because it was so interesting to him. He went back to McKinsey. He immediately became like a technical product manager because he knew how to do this stuff. He was using Python for every project, and everyone else on the team was like, "This is amazing." And then he ended up leaving to start his own like ag tech AI company. They just got funded by MIT, and and he's the CTO of it. And it's like this crazy series of paths where like some people's lives are actually, totally changed, completely because of this stuff. So that's always exciting for me.
So what I'm hearing is basically, it's not really your favorite section of the book, but basically the idea that we have at our fingertips this super powerful tool that can change your life. And that's kind of like what the book is about.
Well, I mean, I would go further. I think one of the most important things of the book is that like we have these limiting beliefs about ourselves that like we're not technical, we can't do this stuff. You need like a 4-year degree, or you're not smart enough, or you're not good enough at math or science to be able to do this stuff. And then people get, slowly along the way, it's like stripping back those limiting beliefs, and then people sort of evolve into these butterflies. Like they're all of a sudden able to do it, and not only can they do it and they realize they can do it, they're like excited about it. It's fun. And I think it's such a shame that this stuff is taught so poorly that it turns people off. That it's just like you throw a few fun examples, you tie it to stuff people care about, and that's that's a game changer. And then you believe in people essentially.
Wow, Mattan, that's super powerful. As you were talking about, the heat maps and the charts, I was getting super interested, and I was like, oh, this is like a nerdy sandbox talk where you like, that's exactly what I want to hear. That's like the most exciting thing you could have ever said.
Yeah.
Maybe it should be called Python for MBA professors too. Maybe that would be a
I know
that would be a thing.
even MBAs is like a little too limiting. It's like Python for people who want to apply it to business problems and interesting problems, but who don't want to be programmers. But that's a little bit long.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
How can Sandboxers support you? And where can we find the book, for example?
Oh man, yeah. So it's on Amazon. You just search Python for MBAs on Google, you'll find it. There's also pythonformbas.com where there's like a bunch of bonus materials and like guides to installing and stuff like that. I think the best way to be supportive is like if you keep your eyes and ears open, and if you hear either about people who are expressing interest in learning this stuff but who don't know where to start, or also programs like we're at business schools or at schools generally. Like one of the reasons why we developed this textbook is there's a lot of more traditional academic institutions and just institutions generally that have a hard time bringing in like more up-to-date content like this, but there's a lot of demand for it. So when you hear of people who might be interested in teaching a class like this, the textbook could be essentially the curriculum. And we're developing additional materials like a syllabus and additional exercises. There's like cases and stuff and problems in there, but like sort of an additional package to make it easier to actually like roll out in a classroom setting, or like as part of a company, for example. Like I've done these trainings for companies before too. But I think that you put a team of like 5 or 10 people together with this book, and they can kind of like teach their own training. So yeah, if you see stuff like that, shoot me an email.
Yeah, so basically if we see someone who has some interest in learning Python and who's maybe in business, who's maybe not a technical person, there's so many resources out there, and basically you're saying that this is a great resource, also a space to watch, because it'll come with additional resources in the very near future.
Totally. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. Thank you so much for telling us about Python for MBAs, Mattan.
Thank you, Netra. This has been great.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.